In this video, I'm going to show you something that I like to do just for fun, and that is to analyze what kind of lights you need to have to create a similar kind of an image. And I just like to do that for fun because, well, it trains my mind to see lighting better. And let's analyze two frames. This is from the latest James Bond movie, and then let's analyze another one. Let's analyze this as well. This is from the movie Leon from the 90s. So let's start with the James Bond one. And when I analyze the lighting, the first thing that I do, I try to identify what is the darkest side of round objects. For example, the head of James Bond, this is the darkest part there, and this shoulder is the darkest part of, well, of the shoulder. And for example, here in this guy's head, this is the darkest part, and this is the darkest part. And the reason why I will look for the darkest part first is that it's the best way to kind of see where are the lights coming from. What is the direction of these lights? For example, because the darkest part is facing the camera, and that's actually a very common cinematic lighting technique. The darkest part is facing the camera, so there is the least amount of light is coming from the direction of the camera. And most of the lights are actually coming from behind the subjects, creating this kind of a rim light that really separates them from the background. And this is actually rather common to have this kind of lighting, and it's called upstage lighting. So if we, let me just draw this. So if this James Bond would be, this is the same situation looking from up. So he's the head of James Bond and shoulders of James Bond. And there's this other guy here, and then this guy in the background would be somewhere here. So in this case, most of the lights, and by the way, the camera is here. This is my beautiful cinema camera. Anyway, so you get the idea. So to get this kind of lighting, you have to have your lights placed on kind of further from the camera than the subject. So the lights would be placed on this side of this imaginary line between the subjects. And this will give a very cinematic image, creating this rim light and leaving this kind of the side facing the camera rather dark. And this will give you a lot of depth and dimensionality. Okay. And this is something you can easily, this is kind of like a rule of thumb. If you want to make something cinematic, place the main light further from the camera than the subject. Anyway, so let's start to analyze how many lights you need to have, to create this kind of a similar kind of lighting. Well, first of all, let's look at the lighting. First we looked at the dark parts, now let's look at the lighting. And you can see that there's this rim light here. Here's a lighting to his head. Here's lighting to his face. Here's lighting to his face. But there's like a lack of light underneath their chin. And here's lighting here as well. So let's start kind of counting how many lights do we need to create the same kind of lighting. Anyway, sorry, I'm a bit random. So let's make the brush smaller. And let's have a bit of space here. So to get this rim light here, we need to have some kind of light here to give it light. And because the light seems to be falling onto his back of his kind of head, it cannot be really high. And when it's low, it means that here, because we have a light here and it's a bit different color. So it means that we seem to have another light somewhere here. And I think this light is falling onto James Bond's hair and then falling onto his face as well. And it's further from the camera because this side of his face is not lit. And then, because this light cannot lit James Bond's face and there's a shadow underneath his chin, so I would assume that there's another light maybe somewhere here. And because the light is rather soft, it means that these are probably quite big light sources. And then there's a clear light here, so it means that there must be some kind of light here as well. And then I would assume that the background, because it feels to me, to my eye, that this light is a bit different color than the background light. So I would assume that there is one rather big light shining onto the background and to his face. So then we will count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we would need 5 rather soft lights to create this look. Okay, that's our first analysis, and then let's go to the second one. Let's look at the Leon. And here, the first things that I would do to analyze this footage would be to look for kind of the dark part of the round objects. That's being this area of the face, and then this dark part on the hand. So those will indicate that there is a lack of light on this direction, to the right of the camera, where he's looking. And then I would like to analyze, then I start to kind of get an idea of the directions of the light. And another thing that I like to look is reflections. For example, this reflection there and this reflection there. Those will give us a hint of the direction of the light. And then, of course, the rim light, or rims, kind of rim lighting on stuff like his shoulder here, and this shoulder here, and maybe the hand here. And then even this underneath of his hand. So those will give us some hint of the direction of the light. And here as well, the rim light on the top of his fingers. Those will give us a hint of the light. So to get this lighting, I would assume, looking at this reflection and the lighting in general, I would assume that here there's a big light source that is is the key lighting for this scene. And you could maybe this background reflection is that light as well, and this reflection there as well. And then you can see this rim light on his ear and on his shoulder. So it must be that here outside of the window there is some kind of a spotlight shining into the room. And then, because we can see the rim light on this ear as well, and here as well, and here this rim light on his shoulder, so it must mean that there's probably another light source facing down there. And then I would assume that this down underneath of his hand is just some kind of a bounce board, maybe white, maybe only the table by itself, just bouncing like back onto his hand. And yeah, to get this kind of lighting, you would need 1, 2, 3 lights, and maybe some kind of a bounce board to bounce the light from below. Okay, I think we have analyzed the lighting, so in the next video let's analyze the grading.